On this episode, we're discussing the pros and cons to staying on or off property at Walt Disney World. Today is January 14th, 2022. This is episode 465 of the Main Street Magic Podcast.
Jeremy and Rhonda are more than a little fond of Disney World, so they made this podcast to share it all with you. Reports and resorts, top 10 lists of all sorts, Main Street Magic's bringing it home for you.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Main Street Magic. I'm your host, Jeremy Stein, and I'm joined by my lovely wife, Rhonda.
Hey, guys.
Make sure you check us out on the web at mainstmagic.com, as well as follow on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at mainstmagic. If you've not done so already, head out to Facebook and search for the Main Street Magic community and ask to join. Then if you want even more content, like this week's live streams of Festival of the Arts opening weekend, you get other in-park, resort, at-home live streams, you get discounts on Main Street Magic merchandise, and a whole lot more. Check out wonderlandcrew.com for our Patreon group. And then finally, if you're getting ready to plan that next Disney, Universal vacation, maybe go on a cruise, or pretty much travel anywhere else in the world, head to msmears.com to learn more about our wonderful travel partner, Melissa Pilgrim, with years of experience, and fill out a form for a free quote. All right, so today I think is going to be an interesting and important episode
Yes.
with all that has transpired over, of course, the past 2 years, maybe even a little bit beyond that. And we're going to talk about truly benefits to staying on property, staying off property, how they compare. I think now a lot of people feel that there are no advantages to staying on property anymore.
Right.
We've had a couple things stripped away.
Right.
Such as?
Well, first of all, fast passes in general.
Yeah.
But when you were staying on property, you did get that 60-day fast pass booking.
Yeah. And that was a huge one,
Yeah.
when you were on property, and that felt like a really, really big
Did.
advantage.
Yes, it did.
What's something else that has been lost, or should I say modified at this point?
Well, your hour early theme park entry that used to be where you'd stay on property and get in an hour early. And yeah, I remember when we would stay on property and get that hour early, if we were going to rope drop or something, it was fantastic.
Yeah, especially when you were looking at, and of course we'll talk about changes in what Fast Pass has become in a little bit, but when you're talking about some of the big rides like Flight of Passage and Seven Dwarfs, that hour entry, if it was for that park that day that you were visiting, really did give you a huge advantage. Now, they started to extend that. And this is where I think it first started, where people were going, wait a second, what's my benefit? They started to extend that to some of the outlying hotels. Some of the Good
Right.
Neighbor, the Bonnet Creek had started to get that extension.
Right.
So then you're kind of like, well, wait,
Right.
is it truly a benefit? What is, I think, the biggest one, has zero effect on us, but it has effect on a lot of people, especially families. And this just started a couple weeks ago.
And that is Magical Express. If you are flying into MCO and, you're so excited to get on this big bus that's going to take you to Disney World, it's not there no more.
Yeah, and they've got the Mears Connect, which already went up in price.
Really?
And it launched, 2 weeks ago or something?
I did not know all that.
Magical Express, I actually used it once because I was leaving early and flying to New York. And it was wonderful. And we've always said, if you're a constant traveler, like, our good friends Kat and Michael,
Yeah.
they Uber because the allure of the Magic Express they've been through. But when
Yes.
you're that family traveling, especially with kids, and you literally have to get off the plane with your carry-on, you don't even see your luggage until basically it shows up in your room when you're at the resort. And just getting on there and watching the video, it certainly was a benefit, and it was included. I'm going to use the word included a lot because free doesn't always feel like free. You certainly were paying for it somewhere.
Right.
But now that it is a hard paid item, if you want to do Mears Connect or forced to take an Uber or a Lyft, which honestly isn't usually possible for parents with kids in car seats unless they're bringing their own. So they're almost forced now to spend even more via Mears Connect. Now, well, we can just skip ahead real quick. That's the same thing with off property.
Yeah.
The problem with a lot of the things that we'll talk about is that they were things that Disney was offering at an included rate that are now an extra rate.
Correct.
Right? Nobody complains about having to take an Uber or a Lyft or a shuttle service to an off property because it's always been that way.
Correct.
So it's very understandable for someone to say, I've been going to Disney for 20 years. I've never had to pay for transportation, and now I do.
Right.
Is 100% understandable.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't separate it from off property, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
So what we're going to get into next is kind of like, well, what is left? What are the advantages to staying on property? And to be honest, there's a lot. Some of them, don't have any cost factor or anything to them. That they've always been this way, but I think they can easily get overlooked. And what is one of the first one that really revolves around just getting around Disney World while you're there?
Well, very much easier transportation, and also a lot depending on where you're staying can be super easy transportation. So,
yeah. I mean, if you look at some of the places that have access to both boats and buses, Skyliner and buses, monorail and buses, even when it's just buses, we don't love the buses, but that is still included.
Yep.
And it is still often the best way to get to a park.
Because they're usually coming every 15 minutes. Sometimes they do get longer, and it is frustrating because you're used to that 15 minutes. But yeah.
But what's the advantage, if you are going to rent a car, you decide that the price of renting a car is better than using Uber or Lyft, and you don't want to use the internal transportation. What is an advantage if you've rented a car or you drive to Disney and you're not an annual pass holder?
Well, staying on property, you get to get into the parks and park for free.
Yeah.
So that's huge because what is it?
$25-$30 now for standard parking. So, you're
at
there
every
for,
park.
and you're there for a 7-day trip or something, you're already talking $200 pretty much, if you're going to the parks every day in addition. And if you've brought your own car, it might not be as big of a deal, but if you've already rented one, then you're really adding up. And you certainly probably see, the thing is you could spend that much going back and forth in an Uber. So if
this is where I think it just comes down to somebody like you, getting that numbers all together and me going, all right, babe, what about this? Or what about this? Or, when it does come down to price, you're like, well, let's think about this, and this. And then you add all those numbers up and
one of the things is you do have to think of ease.
Yes.
In a sense of, yes, sometimes you could go, you know what? I can rent a car, or I can do Uber, over the course of a week and save X dollars, but you have to figure out, does it actually make your life easier? Is the included transportation easier sometimes?
Correct.
So it's just those things that you want to always balance. So, if you do have a vehicle though, that proximity to the parks is another advantage if you are driving.
Right.
It's a huge advantage especially if you're like, you know what, I'm going to stay off property, save a ton of money on the other side of I-4 or, down the road closer to Universal or something like that. Or being that close to parks. I mean, I think of another reason we love Coronado is its proximity to Animal Kingdom is right around the corner.
Yep.
Epcot and Hollywood Studios are not far. Magic Kingdom becomes a bit of a hike, but you don't want to drive to Magic Kingdom anyway.
No, correct.
Even if you have a car on property, which we always do, we take a bus or we would, literally make a reservation at a monorail restaurant and then Uber so they would let you in if we had to, but we're going to take the bus for that. So that proximity, I think, does make a big difference when you are trying to get around, especially in quickness, if you're doing multiple parks in a day, going to Disney Springs, going back to your room, things like that. What's another advantage still to being on property?
Well, they still don't have resort fees like you do usually at off properties.
Yeah. Resort fees, and this is definitely an air quote, are included with the cost of rising prices. One of the things that's always bothered us about certain off properties is they do that kind of bait and switch.
Right.
Say, the room's $200 a night, and then you check in and they say there's also a $30 resort fee and a $20 parking fee. And you think, well, why didn't you just say the room was $250 a night?
Right.
Well, the problem that's now been created is that could be exactly what Disney's doing. They did start charging separately for parking, but not everybody has a car. So for us, it's easy to say, you're going to charge me $20 a night for parking. Why didn't you just make the room $20 more?
Right.
Well, that's not fair to the person without one.
Right.
So it's understandable to separate that. But everybody takes advantage of the air quote, resort fee. So therefore they could be saying, well, this room was $250 a night. You know what? we're going to start charging resort fees by making it $280 a night.
Right.
Or it's just the rising costs in general.
Correct.
But it is something that I still think can be used as an advantage, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, again, it's that number thing where, like we said, if we're looking at an off-property price and, we're like, we love the Flamingo Crossing area usually, and thank God, as of right now, anytime we see the price, there's no added resort fees. But then I'm like, hey, what does Dolphin say again?
Yeah.
And, you might be like, 310. And I'm like, oh, that's not bad. But then I'm like, wait,
but that's $360.
That's $360 because of the added resort fees. So
now a big advantage though to a Swan and Dolphin is obviously being able to use that Disney transportation. Whereas, and we love Town Place and walking distance. But when you look at something like, let's just go over maybe to some areas like a Bonnet Creek, you have a car.
Right.
And I don't know their exact fees, but let's just say most of these are $30 a night, and let's say 15 parking. You're $45 already, right?
Right.
For us, we often won't take advantage of our car when it's later in the day because we like to have some drinks and we're not going to drive back to the resort after that.
Right.
So then we have to add an Uber on top.
Right.
So now we've added a 15-minute one-way or $15 one-way Uber. That $300 a night room is now at roughly $360 before any other taxes and stuff. So again, that's where you got to play the math game, and we're going to talk pricing a little bit more. What's something else that I think people forget is an advantage because they did technically take away it being free?
Yes, but if you still have, what we're talking about is obviously magic bands. You can save up to 50%. And if you've been going to Disney anytime, I feel like in the past 5 years, if you still have a magic band, it will still work. You do not have to buy new ones, which is fantastic. And I love the magic bands because I don't have to worry about a room key where everywhere off property you have to have a room key.
I hate room keys.
I know, because
I'm just so scared I'm going to lose them. Yeah, we have. And it's easy to get a new one, but you just don't want to deal with any of that stuff.
And when you have a magic band and it's just on your wrist, or if you get the little cute keychain thing, and, it's just so simple. Our girls are older now, so sometimes they like to just hang out at the pool while we run to a park. Well, they have charging abilities where if they're hungry, they can stop and, go to siestas and get a burger, and then we don't have to worry about them having money because you can, charge room stuff to your magic band. So
yeah, and it's, when you're talking about that 50%, you can pre-order magic bands at a discounted cost, and they come out to usually about 50% off. So you can get some of the different, I'll just call them custom bands. I collect bands now, nowhere near what some people do, like Kat and Michael. I think they have a magic band room in their house, but so it's just, again, it's kind of one of those advantages. Now, certainly if you're off property, you can get on property, you can buy a magic band, you can still use it to get in and out of the park, you can use it for your Genie Plus and Lightning Lane, but you can't charge back to your room. You can't get into your room with it. This weekend, I will be walking up to our room at Fairfield Inn and probably trying to scan my magic band every once in a while.
Yep.
So yeah, I do think it's still an advantage, and especially if you collect them, to be able to get some of the ones you like at up to 50% off really is a pretty good savings. So we talked earlier about the 1 hour early theme park entry going away, but what do we still have? And this is every day, every park, as opposed to the 1 hour that was based on kind of day and specific park.
Okay. Well, now it is 30 minutes early. Woo-hoo.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's, this.
But 30 minutes, I mean,
that could still make a difference.
Of all these off-property people. When was it? We were staying off-property. We were at Epcot. Oh, because we were staying at Universal. That's right. And we drove into Epcot, and we were there when it opened.
Yeah.
And I remember standing in the crowd of you can't get in yet.
Off-property people.
And I'm like, and there was a lot of people, and I was also like, oh man,
I want to be up there. I want to be inside. I know.
So, I mean, again, I was joking, 30 minutes. It's not a big deal. But, to some of those people who do not want to, and what we'll talk about in a few minutes is Genie Plus, you don't want to get into any of that. That is the number one thing to do. Get there when you can, for sure, 30 minutes, if not 45 minutes early by the time, you get off the bus and everything, you get in and then you can go and rope drop your stuff. And then you're 30 minutes ahead of a big crowd that's coming later.
Yeah. I mean, in that aspect, if we want to talk cost, even if you are able to rope drop one paid Lightning Lane ride that you now don't have to pay for, you have just saved money.
Correct.
In a sense. So this is where you really, like, in the long run, you're going to want to break out an Excel spreadsheet as you start to think of these things. And then you start to think, all right, is price difference worth me saving, $44 on Frozen Ever After? Because instead we're able to rope drop it at a shorter time. Right. That's type of things that you got to think about. Also now, this one, I haven't gotten to experience it, but it's extended evening theme park hours. Now, this is only available to Disney Deluxe, Deluxe Villa Resorts, and then some other select resorts like Swan and Dolphin. They get extended evening theme park hours on select nights at select parks for 2 hours.
Wow.
Now, I watched touring plans do a couple of these, and it seemed, especially at Epcot, which of course it's Epcot, but there's not a ton to do maybe after hours there kind of, but it seemed to be that waits were very short, crowds were very low, and it definitely seemed to be an advantage.
Awesome.
So
I'm assuming they're kicking out people like they do for the parties.
Correct.
Where you go to get on a ride.
You're going to have to scan your ban.
Scan ban.
Yep.
Okay.
So, and they can do the same thing like around the hub to keep you from going into different lands, around the hub and stuff at Magic Kingdom.
Okay.
I totally get you're paying a premium to be deluxe or DVC. But again, this is one of those that hurts a little because they've really singled out value and moderate folks. When you pay deluxe prices, you get deluxe restaurants, you get deluxe locations, and you get deluxe food, you get deluxe service. You know what I mean? So,
but being at a moderate or a value, you can reserve a reservation for a deluxe restaurant.
Yeah. Well, I know that. I'm just saying in general.
So I mean, but I'm saying
I know, but I'm saying in general, you're paying more to be in a deluxe.
Okay.
Because you're getting more in the end.
Yeah.
And this is an inclusion. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I'm not arguing it. I'm just saying for people that tended to stay moderate and have stayed a lot and spent a lot, it stung a little bit.
Okay.
But I totally understand it. I do.
Okay. And I can see how it does. Yes. Okay. Yes, I can.
Yes. So that's all.
But,
I love it. I mean, I think it's great because the reason is, and it would devalue this if they allowed it to everyone, because then I could see going and paying $700 a night at the Poly, going for the 2 hours after and being like, well, this is crowded. Everybody's here from value to deluxe.
And the only thing I will say is like, okay, yes, it does sting that it's just for them, whatever, which I think they completely 100% deserve it.
That's
but
fair. Completely fair.
It would be nice to see little things like, come to maybe different nights, maybe an hour for moderate.
Yeah. Well, here's a thought, because these are select nights, select parks. So it could still be 2 hours. Why couldn't you do potentially on Monday, in theory, and again, you'd have to rotate this through. On Monday at Epcot is deluxe. On Monday at Magic Kingdom is moderate. And on Monday at Values is Animal Kingdom. On Tuesday,
get confusing.
Deluxe is at Magic Kingdom. Moderate is at Animal Kingdom. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Could you switch it around where you're not allowing all three tiers on one specific extra hours night? Maybe that would be something you could look at doing. And even like you said, and again, staffing aside and things like and operations aside, even if they did that rotation, Deluxe got 3 hours, moderate got 2 on their night, and I don't know, value got 1. I mean, something to still give a little benefit to the value and moderates, I think would be kind of cool, but I get where they're coming from.
Yeah.
One that I think a lot of people don't realize, and honestly, I did not realize until very recently, is, our 180-day ADRs are gone. Thank God. Honestly, I think 60 days is fair. Even sometimes 60 days, you're thinking, I got to figure out where to eat in 60 days. But imagine when it was 6 months.
No.
So I like this change. If you are on property at your 60-day mark, you can make dining reservations for every single day of your trip up to 10 days.
So if you're staying 14, you're out of luck.
you would have to wait 4 more days to then make those remaining ones. So if you're, from the UK, like a lot of people come for 2 weeks. If you're off-site, you can make dining reservations at 60 days for your first day. Then the next day, you would have to make them for your second day. Next day, third. So every morning, you would be waking up 60 days away from your trip to make your dining reservations.
So that would be, in my opinion, a big...
Well, meanwhile, remember, third day in your trip, if you started your trip the same day as an on-site guest, they've already had 3 days to get ADRs ahead of you, which means you're even more limited in what could potentially be available.
Wow.
So if eating is your thing and, there's some must-do restaurants, that's a pretty big one.
Yeah.
Lightning Lane. Okay. It first opened and it was hard to figure out the advantage to the extra paid attractions because they were releasing them to on-property guests at 7 a.m. And these are the paid ones. And then off-property was able to book them at park opening. Well, originally it would sell out to on-property guests, and then they released more when the park opened to off-property, which was zero advantage to on-property. In fact, sometimes off-property people were getting better times than the on-property. So Disney changed that. 7 a.m. if you're on property, you can do your paid Lightning Lane attractions. Anybody who's off property and has purchased, wants to purchase them, cannot do it until the park opening. Rise of Resistance will be sold out. Yeah, 7,
So
and then potentially 9 o'clock for a lot of the parks.
My goodness.
8 o'clock for Animal Kingdom, but Rise we're seeing sell out. We're seeing sometimes Seven Dwarfs sell out. You're seeing certain rides might sell out. Remy's is selling out. So again, it's a major advantage if you're looking to do those.
Right.
Because you have a 2 hour to, 1, 2, 3 hour head start sometimes depending on when the park opens. So that is an advantage.
Yes.
What are why don't you wrap together our last kind of 3 advantages in general? Because these honestly don't even have you leaving your resort.
Yeah, and I love it. It's, the number 1 to me is the theming. Number 2 is resort activities. And number 3 is just staying in that Disney bubble.
Yeah.
And it's just the theming, depending on where you stay, we're very fortunate and we only have I think 3 places we have not stayed. But every theming is just incredible and so fun, and you just really feel a part of what you're at, be it a Poly, be it a, Port Orleans, be it, even Pop, which is cute, and, with the oversized stuff and even the value resorts, I mean, I think that's so fun. And then the resort activities, oh my goodness. First of all, even the value resorts are good activities, and moderate gets a little bit better, and there's more, and there's some paid things to do, but it's still fun, especially, Florida. You never know if it's going to rain for an hour or 10. Yeah. So, that's always fantastic. And then of course, deluxe, even better activities, and so many that, there's been times we've stayed at deluxe and we can't fit in all the activities.
Oh, not even close.
On a rainy day where we're staying literally at the hotel the entire day.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think this is a major part, and this especially comes down to the once a year people, the first timers. I think it really makes such a difference. We're staying off property this weekend. And
I'm a little sad.
I am too. I absolutely love the Disney theming. I love the Disney bubble, the resort activities, things like that. Some of these off properties, I think of, and this is going a little bit further off, but close to Animal Kingdom, Margaritaville. We first time we walked into Margaritaville, you're like, obviously it's Jimmy Buffett, so I would know that what was going on. But if you had blindfolded me, sat me in the lobby, and I opened my eyes, I'd be like, is this a brand new Disney resort I didn't know about? A deluxe Disney resort?
Yeah.
Because the theming is absolutely outstanding there. And, there's some other off properties. I mean, where we stayed at Flamingo Crossing, it is neat to walk in, and there's always the Star Wars display with the BB unit. And there are some touches of Disney because you can purchase park tickets there.
Right.
The elevators are always wrapped, usually a lot of times in Star Wars, Stormtroopers. When we did the Embassy Suites, which was even a little bit further off the beaten path, inside of the glass elevator, it looked like the inside of the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon.
Yes, that was
so
super
there's some
cool.
little touches that are neat, but it's nothing like being in a Disney themed on property resort.
Yes.
Even when you get to Swan and Dolphin, which is beautiful, you don't have this theme of Disney, and
Yeah, that's true.
it's kind of what you want. You want your vacation to be so immersive the entire time you're there, all the way down to your resort, and little touches in rooms and things like that.
I wish Swan and Dolphin would do something more, but I feel like with Swan and Dolphin, you don't need the room and you don't need the inside, because you walk outside and right there.
Yeah.
I mean, you're walking from Epcot, you're walking from, Hollywood Studios. These could be a little bit long walks, but still, if
you
you're
hop
up
on the
for
Skyliner.
it, you hop. Yep. It's just so awesome.
Yeah. I'd like to get back there if
know.
again, is one of those things you just got to hunt down.
Yeah.
Okay. So, look, we're not trying to sell Disney here. We're not trying to tell you should stay on property. We're not saying that on property is technically better than off property.
Correct.
If you do decide to book and want to stay on property, go to msmears.com and use Melissa Pilgrim.
Yes,
you can
please
get
do.
a free quote, and she is absolutely wonderful.
And it's free
She
to
will
you.
find you the best deals she possibly can. Off property, when we break it down, in reality, only has two benefits.
Okay.
Price, which is a big one.
Yes.
Understandable.
Of course.
Often room size.
Yeah, that's true.
The Flamingo Crossing we love. All those are suites.
Yes.
Town Place Suites, Spring Hill Suites, Home 2 Suites.
Yep.
Homewood Suites. I might as well finish them off, right? What is there? Fairfield Inn and Suites, and then there's a
Is it
residence.
Fairfield Inn
Yeah,
and
then a
Suites?
residence inn
Okay.
and suites.
Okay.
So they are larger rooms.
Yes.
A lot of them will have anywhere from a full kitchen to kind of like a half or makeshift kitchen.
Right.
Huge advantage, room size, price.
Yes.
A lot of them have wonderful amenities.
Yeah. Yes, they do.
But nothing that is going to be beneficial above and beyond, I think, from Disney.
Correct.
A lot of them have wonderful service.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing, though, that I think is going to set them apart and say it's better than Disney.
Correct.
A lot of them have transportation. It's definitely not as good or as convenient as Disney's.
Right.
So, in reality, if we were able to, and it's a huge but,
Yeah.
if you could take price out of the picture, I personally don't see why anybody would choose off property versus on property. Because then size of room actually goes out the window, because there are larger rooms at Disney. Now, again, if price was gone, there's zero reason you would ever stay off property. Do you pretty much agree with that?
Yeah. I do. Yep.
And I know that's not a fair assumption, because price is never gone.
Oh, right. And you
And
really
that is
have
the driving
to think
factor.
about that. Absolutely.
Here-
Absolutely.
Here's the simple thing right now is that looking at, rooms often on property, and we can talk a moderate. We don't have to pick one specifically. Let's talk a moderate. We're now looking at potentially $300 to $350, room rate per night. And that's usually with an AP or Florida discount.
Right.
You can probably get the same room over at Flamingo Crossing, potentially for $150 a night.
Mm-hmm.
Both are going to add your taxes and your fees. So let's just be fair and say that your room all in is $200 a night and larger at Flamingo Crossing.
Right.
And your room gets down to $400 a night for a studio at a moderate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's where off property gets the advantage.
Right. Because you're saving $200.
Now, this is where you do break out the spreadsheet and you go,
right.
All right, we're going to rent a car. Okay, what does that add to our trip? Or we're going to Uber every day to and from.
Mm-hmm.
Advantage to Ubering is you do not have to pay for parking at the parks. Whereas if you rent a car, you then have to pay for parking.
Or you could try to use the bus system. But
Yeah.
I do believe, and please try to correct me if I'm wrong, I do believe that it's not even every hour or 2 hours. It is a set schedule. It is let's say a bus comes at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then that might not even be right on time, and it may go to a couple of parks.
Yes. And you usually have to reserve your spot.
Okay.
And most of the schedules that we've ever seen, you'd be hard pressed to be there for rope drop.
And that's where I was going to go with that. Yes.
And same thing, staying at a park till closing, because in the afternoon or evening, they're going to say, all right, a bus is at 5:45, at 7, and at 8:45.
Right.
Also, these shuttles, and they're more shuttles, not full buses.
Right.
These shuttles, if you're going to Magic Kingdom, cannot drop you off at Magic Kingdom. They have to drop you off at TTC. So you're now adding that entire travel time doing the monorail, a ferry boat.
Right.
So these are ones also where you're doing your spreadsheet. You need to evaluate time versus money.
Right. Because like if you do say we're not going to rope drop, we're going to use the shuttle in the morning, because all of these two, which ones we're talking about, do have an advantage of a hot breakfast.
They do. That's a great point you bring up.
So, because I was thinking, because we usually do a breakfast, let the girls eat, and then, we get to a park because we're not worried about, trying to ride stuff.
Right.
So if you're that morning, like, all right, we're going to enjoy this nice hot breakfast, and then we're going to get this 9:30, whatever, 9 o'clock shuttle, and then we're going to go. If you're wanting to then close the park, I mean, my biggest thing is I would just be ready to pay for an Uber.
Yeah.
Because if you do miss that shuttle or whatever, then you do have to.
Yeah.
That's the only way you can get back.
Well, and here, this will help you out with your spreadsheet. And you brought up a great point about the hot breakfast. I completely didn't even think about, just because we're not a eat breakfast every morning family. A lot are.
Correct.
There's a lot where, mom or dad or sending the teen is going down to the food court and dropping $40-$50 for breakfast for a family of 4. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're saving that at off property, boom, there's your trade-off for Uber or Lyft.
Yep.
So that's a really good way to kind of put it. And again, when you're looking at that pricing, I think, another thing you can look at, and you can do this for on-property hotels as well, but look at the third-party websites and apps. Mm-hmm. We've had a lot of luck with hotels.com, priceline.com. Mm-hmm. Most recently, we came across the Hopper app.
Yes.
And if you listened to last episode, we closed it out by saying we were going to talk about this new app and how it saved us $300 at Town Place Suites.
Yes.
After we were done recording that show, we went to finalize our payment on Town Place Suites, and we had a little bit of an issue. So let me walk through some of this. Mm-hmm. So the Hopper app is much like a hotels.com, priceline.com. It is looking for lower rates. I don't know how these sites work. If they buy rooms in bulk, if they, there's a third party type of thing that's going on here, but it will show you the rooms at a much lower cost. We originally had booked Town Place Suites through hotels.com, and it was going to cost us $600 for the 3 nights. Mm-hmm. Hopper app went in. It was going to cost us $300 for the 3 nights.
And Lucy, shout out to Lucy. She was the one who told us to do this. And they had, let me just go ahead and preface, they had a fantastic experience.
Yes.
I am so happy this has happened to us, so we can tell y'all about it and we can just explain it. And just to say beware, because nothing was her fault. Nothing was nobody's fault other than I am super happy, like I said, that our experience was bad. Lucy had a fantastic one.
Yeah. So basically what happened is when she told me about this, I was like, heck yes, this is great. I'll cancel my room through hotels.com right now. We just basically, I think, had a credit card on hold because you can pay when you get there, which can be a big advantage a lot of times.
Yes.
Hopper app is basically saying, all right, well, you have to pay the full amount right now. And I'm like, okay, well, we don't want to pay the full $300 right now. So they have this price freeze, and you pay a percentage per night. It was going to be $15 per night, so $45, and they would freeze the price, and we would have up until 1 week ahead of time to pay it off. Thought that's perfect.
Right.
The price, if it goes up, doesn't go up on us. If it goes down, though, they do take the price down for us. Okay. So we're set 1 week prior. This is literally last Friday, 1 week before our trip. And we go in to pay, and it says, I'm sorry, there are no rooms. So if we do want to put blame on anyone, it's me technically for not reading whatever fine print there was. They certainly weren't very forthright about it.
Correct.
Price freeze certainly does freeze the price. It does not freeze a room. So the hotel booked out, which means we're left with 0 room.
Yep.
Now, if you want to get a refund on your price freeze, they'll put it back into your wallet in the Hopper app. It does not go back to your card. It goes back to your wallet for further use. I thought, all right, well, let's just do that and let's start looking around. So we're looking around Friday, and I'm like trying to find a deal. We're even checking Disney hotels and thinking I can use this wallet thing later, whatever. So I get up. We don't book a room that day. We just couldn't find what we wanted. We're looking for.
We were looking everywhere.
Everywhere.
DVC.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
And it wasn't so much that we couldn't find a room. It was that all the room prices had gone up exponentially, where our weekend was going to be $200 more overall now.
Right.
If we booked right away.
Right.
So I thought, all right, let me just take a breath, think what to do, and look at this Saturday. So Saturday, I open up my Hopper app. My $45 is gone out of my wallet. I'm like, okay. There's obviously some more fine print that I chose not to read, apparently, but that I also don't think they were very forthcoming about. So I contact Hopper, who, by the way, their customer service was very, very good.
Good.
So if you do a price freeze and you refund it back to your wallet, it still has to be used by the original date your price was frozen to.
Oh my God.
For example, if this had happened to us a week prior, we still would have had a week to use that price freeze money again. Again, right. I was completely unaware. So I hit them up on Twitter, because none of these apps can you just go to a website and do like a contact form or a chat. You have to contact them through like Twitter. So I DM'd them within 5 minutes. I think someone got back to me. She said, can you send me some screenshots? Send them to her. They emailed me, and she said, I'm sorry, here's how it works. And she explained it. And I just responded and said, that's really good to know. I was completely unaware of that. I know it for the future, but to be honest, I doubt I will use the Hopper app again after this. She responded and said, I'm so sorry. I totally understand your frustration. That is not the type of, customer service we want to give. And I thought, all right, I'm out $45. I lesson learned. And again, that $45 at that point to me was worth it to tell other people the details of this.
Correct.
Right? So the next morning, I get an email from a manager in customer service who says, I'm so sorry. We totally understand your frustration. It was brought to my attention you were unhappy. I'm going to put your $45 back in for additional 10 days. Within 5 minutes, it was back in there. I said, thank you. And she said, you know what? I put it in for 20 days. So at this point, we now have about 17, 18 days to look at a future stay, and whether we book it full, I can use the $45, or if we do another price freeze, I can use it towards it. Now we know, lesson learned.
Yes.
I'm not going to fully recommend the Hopper app, and I'm not going to recommend against it. Mm-hmm. Again, in Lucy and Caleb's case, this went perfectly.
Right.
There was nothing hidden. There was nothing tricky. They booked the room. They got it at the price that it said. Out of curiosity, I've started really poking around in the Hopper app to just kind of learn more about it.
Right, because you actually shocked me today when you told me that you could actually get a Disney room in the Hopper app.
Yep. Now, one thing that Hopper, you can certainly put in location, Disney Springs, Walt Disney World, Winter Garden. We'll pull up a lot of the Flamingo Crossings.
Nice.
But it seems, I don't know if there's a way to set the geographical range around it, because it brings up, it seems like, everything.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And if you type in Disney Springs, it seems like it'll bring up 2 of those hotels, but then there's 5 that are a little further and cheaper, and then you got to kind of scroll through.
Okay.
If you know the exact hotel you want, type it in.
Okay.
So for example, I thought we're looking at going March 3rd for a night for the opening of Flower and Garden, to see Rachel, hopefully that Friday, do a morning and early afternoon at Typhoon Lagoon with her.
Yeah.
So on Disney's website, I'm looking around, and Coronado Springs is available.
Yeah.
Right? It's at $241 a night.
Okay.
One night, all in, is $271.
Okay.
I thought, let me go look at Hopper, and let's see what they're saying.
Okay.
They list the room for one night It is not a specific room selection. It is that it will be given to you upon your arrival. So it could be anything.
Okay.
Right? So maybe that is a good advantage in the future. But it technically could be anything. Now, not knowing that for sure, though, when you go to check out, it shows the room at $302 a night, an additional almost $70. Then there's an additional $64 in tax recovery charges and service fees. So that your room overall for that evening would be roughly $340, which is $70 more
That's
than
crazy.
direct through Disney. Now, a possibility is that that $302 is actually reserving you a preferred room, but not telling you.
Yeah, but
But it's a little bit of a bait and switch, showing you that
Yeah.
original lower price when
I'd
I can
rather
still get it through cheaper
go
through
straight
Disney,
through Disney
and get a
'cause-
water view.
And
right?
but you never know because that's another part of that, I
Disney
love
magic,
Disney
sure.
magic and theming and resort and staying in the bubble.
And I will say again, I sent some screenshots when we're looking at Town Place Suites to Lucy and these extra charges and how the room rate was higher than what they were showing. And she's like, our shows none of that.
Wow.
So in the end, Hopper app, any of the apps, just watch at your final checkout price.
Yep.
That is the biggest thing I will say. Don't get baited on a $230 room that ends up basically being $340.
Right.
But take a look at it and compare.
Yep.
All right. In the end, I know we went on a kind of a long one with all about that, but I think it's super, super important because we will be doing more off-property stays.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people will be doing more off-property stays.
I think this is the year we need to try to do the not Price is Right. I want to say
Priceline,
Priceline,
the ones.
the
Yeah,
secret.
you can always use the secret prices. Hotels does a Hotels Express. They still make me nervous.
I know.
But I think in the end, Disney still has a lot of benefits to staying on property.
Oh, 100%.
What you have
I
to
agree.
look at in the end is the price in your budget. If you
Yes.
have no problem going for a week and paying $350 a night for a moderate
Absolutely.
over $150 a night for an off property, then it's an absolute no-brainer. Spend your money, budget. You're going to have an incredible time. I'm not saying you won't off property because you'll have a huge savings, but you really need to start to nickel and dime it. I know we're unhappy with the things that Disney has taken away. I know we're unhappy with the price increases, but they're here to stay. So you have a decision to make
Right.
as a consumer and as a guest.
Absolutely.
And it's not going to change. So you really need to look at all the advantages, the disadvantages, and that's how you base your decision, right?
Right.
In the end.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Anything else that you want to add? I mean, again, we're still looking at, that March 3rd, we're still looking at potentially staying at Coronado for the night because of all the reasons we just said.
Right. Yep.
But we are looking at, all right, what would it be at Flamingo Crossing?
And we're also looking at, that Hopper we'll try and maybe, we'll look at Swan and Dolphin and see what pops up there. Or, we're just, and we'll keep you updated. And, we are staying at Fairfield Inn and Suites this weekend.
Yep.
So if you do want to see some live streams, go join Wonderland Crew because we will live the rooms. You'll see how big it is. You'll see,
Breakfast, every dish at Festival of Arts that we eat. Another option that we did an episode not too long ago, I had Shannon Ford on to talk about DVC rentals.
Oh, yeah, we're looking at doing that too.
Another genius of DVC rentals is our friend Kat.
Yes.
And I'm sure that if you ask some questions in the Main Street Magic community on Facebook, she'd be happy to answer them. She is an absolute guru at hunting down and getting incredible DVC rental deals, which, for example, in February, we were chatting with her today. She was able to save money by switching from Caribbean Beach to Boardwalk.
And we're
through
looking at
DVC
doing the
rentals.
same thing.
We're going to try and stalk. We're going to maybe get her as our stalker agent on it or something. But thank you guys so much for listening. I hope this helped. We really want to carry on this conversation, especially because I think it's such a hot topic right now.
Oh, yeah.
On property versus off.
Absolutely.
On social, in the Main Street Magic community on Facebook. Let us know when your next trip is. Let us know if you're on property or off, what influenced those decisions, how you kind of budget it out, and what different things you look at when choosing. If you're out there, hit that subscribe button. Then you get these brand new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. And you're already in iTunes and stuff, so you might as well leave us a rating and review.
Yes, because it does help our show grow.
That's all we've got. We'll see you real soon.
Jeremy and Rhonda are more than a little fond of Disney World, so they made this podcast to share it all with you. Reports and resorts, top 10 lists of all sorts, Main Street Magic's bringing it home for you.